Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock, so let's get started. Quick introductions up here at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Williams and Godwin, and to my left, Vice President Malone, Directors Clausen and Eastham, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. I'm Sean Eystone. Welcome, everyone. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment will take place at the beginning of the meeting, and each person shall have 4 minutes to do so. So we can get right into community comment. First up, Joseph Dobryan.
Joseph Dobryan, 1015 2nd Avenue. I call the board's attention to the mask mandate that the board voted to continue a few weeks ago. I'm wearing a mask in this room because it's a house rule. I wear it under protest. I wish to tell the board what I have seen at various public events I've attended over the past few days. I went to a meeting of the Johnson County Republican Central Committee. Nobody wore a mask. I went to a Hawkeyes football game at Kinnick Stadium. I saw maybe 2 or 3 masks in a crowd of 70,000. I went to an orchestra concert at the University of Iowa School of Music. There, about 90% of the audience wore masks. I went to a band concert at the same venue. Now, a band concert attracts a slightly more down-market demographic. The audience appeared to be a little more blue-collar, and only about 1/3 of them wore masks. I go to Mass every Sunday, and I never see a mask there. And we receive the Holy Eucharist on the tongue without fear. 3 days ago, I attended a dramatization of Fyodor Dostoevsky's parable, The Grand Inquisitor, at the University Library. This was a very Tony event that attracted only elite, intellectual, educated people. The Grand Inquisitor poses the question, did God do us any favor by granting us free will? Or would we be better off simply being ordered about? The actors went unmasked, but I was the only member of the audience not wearing a mask. The irony was not lost on me. From these various events, I conclude that the mask has nothing to do with health or safety. For adults, the mask is merely a value statement. It serves the same purpose as a star on the belly of a sneetch. However, I suggest that a mask mandate for school children serves no purpose but to teach these children irrational fear and submissiveness. Common sense tells me that covering your face with a dirty, snot-filled scrap of paper will do far more harm than good to a child's physical health. And Lord knows what the psychological damage will amount to. I'll close with a quote from the late C.S. Lewis. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own consciences. I ask God's blessing on your deliberations. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Next up, Kathy, is it Graw? Sorry if I pronounced it wrong.
This off while I speak. Is that okay? Is it okay if I take this off while I speak? It's actually gray whey. It looks like gras. Everybody says gras because that's what it looks like. So just for clarification. I am basically speaking tonight to ask the board to expand their knowledge or consideration or perspective on the masks. Is there anybody in here that was born before 1950? Could I see a show of hands if anybody was born? I lived through the polio pandemic, and I'm only telling you that you have no idea what a real pandemic is like. And I'm not trying to diminish those who were harmed or died because of it. I'm just telling you there is a lot more out there to consider besides just the CDC. I watched a presentation of a gal who is an environmental air quality something, and she was giving a presentation. Her job is to keep the operating room air and like new construction. Her job is the air quality, and she was giving a presentation about masks, and she said, this virus is 1/40,000th the width of a strand of hair. I mean, picture any strand, I don't care how thin, how thick, picture 1/40,000th, that's the size of the virus. What she's saying is these masks don't cut it. They can't stop that, it's too small. The N95 probably, but the rest of it, not so much. And I've got a friend who's doing postdoctoral research on infectious diseases at a university here in the United States. And he has told me that these masks don't work. So I'm asking for you guys to consider other data that might be out there besides the CDC. And I very respectfully sent quite a few, I think all of you, some information that I had come across on masks, just with the idea of understanding that there might be something more than the institutional narrative of the CDC. But also the CDC, if you have followed anything, they are so corrupted by Big Pharma that you really have to step back and think about this supposed institutional narrative. Guys who are on the FDA, supposed to monitor and supervise Moderna or Pfizer, they're on their board. I mean, there's just, I'm trying to invite people to expand their knowledge. I feel sorry for kids that have to wear these masks, especially if they're not that effective, and especially when the infection rate, the survival rate is very good for kids. My time is almost up. But the basic thing I want to do is just help people to consider other alternatives. My biggest one, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but if I were on a school board, I should be asking for this. Last year, 2020 to 2021 school year, there were many schools in the state that mandated masks. There were many schools in the state that did not. Now, what a simple exercise in comparison that would be, whether it be the Department of Public Health, whether it would be the School Board Association, I'm not sure. But it could be done even by a school board just by doing their own research without having to pay for it. But it would seem to me that would be about as good of a measure as I could imagine, because look how many school systems we have across the state. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Next up, Sheila Pinter.
Sheila Pinter, 303 Highland Drive. Full disclosure, I am a school board candidate. Transparency and accountability are important elements of my campaign platform. Transparency develops and maintains trust, which is critical in any relationship. Parents are an important partner in their child's education. The district has had the spring assessment test scores since September 24th. Individual scores were released October 13th. It seems reasonable that the board has seen the district assessment. Surrounding districts have also released their scores. So why the delay in the release of our district assessment? This delay only erodes trust, and I question if the district is truly interested in transparency. Final question. What is the district's magic number for when we can take off these masks?
All right, thank you. That was our last community commenter, so we can move into our agenda. Prior to agenda approval, I would ask to make a couple small changes to remove items I number 1 and K number 1. It's the policy review and then the action for the student appearance policy. There have been some last minute changes, so the policy that's here in the attached is not the final version, so I would not want to have it as a reading and an action item on it. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those changes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Sorry, my mouse wasn't working, so I need to get this.
That's all right.
I'm sorry, Charlie, you were second, who was the first?
I was the second, and Charlie was the first, Kim.
Online voting is open. Not. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thanks, Kim. I resisted the urge to hum the Jeopardy theme song. All right, we can move into our consent agenda. Did any directors have questions after reviewing the bills that they'd like to bring attention to? All right. Any items from consent directors would like to pull? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move the agenda, the agenda consent to be approved.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Sorry, guys, I am having so much trouble with my mouse. Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, and we got it done before the countdown hit 0.
Yeah, all good.
All right, we can move down to our policy review, and we'll skip down to the 100 series. So this was, we took up the 100 series, at our September P&G meeting, and we had a few changes. Most notably, they're attached here in this review. Wanted to make sure that in several of the documents that had a few of our current employees of who to talk to for different things, I want to make sure we added Janet Abeo Parker in there and her contact information. So that got added in to the various relevant places to those. I think that's all that's attached here, were those changes. We did kind of look at them last time, so I don't know if there's any questions from folks on those. We will have an action later, so we can have the discussion now prior to that. Everybody feel pretty good about it? All right. All right, so let's move into our discussion items, the meat of our meeting tonight. First up is Pepple and Save. So I don't know, am I kicking it off to you, Matt?
I'm going to pull it up over here just to show a couple things on the. Get it done beforehand, sorry. Oh, there's our reminder. All right, can you guys hear me okay? Am I standing close enough? All right, so thank you, President Eystone. Tonight what we wanted to do is just review the upcoming vote on November 2nd regarding the Pepple and Save, and just encourage people to please do show up and vote your interest on that. You see some information here on the district's webpage, and basically if you just Google like I did, Facility Master Plan 2.0, this landing spot is where you'll end up from the Google search. And you can see here in this blue offset box is some similar information that the community would have received in a district mailer surrounding this. And so it really talks about what the Pepple is, the Fiscal Plant and Equipment Levy, which is a $1.34 tax on a $1,000 taxable valuation. And then the SAVE, that's also defined here, Secure and Advanced Vision for Education, is funded through state sales tax dollars. And what we're asking the public, the question around is really for the revenue purpose statement, which outlines then how the district would expend those saved dollars. And so it's a no new money request. These are already existing components in place. The Physical Plant and Equipment Levy for the district, the current one runs through 2025. And so the district's posing the question about extending that to 2035. The state has extended the state sales tax to 2050, and so then our revenue purpose statement, again, defining what we would do with those saved dollars, would run concurrently with that all the way to 2050. For people that want more information, again, I would point them to this website. There's some important pieces here. This ballot language is a component. It's the exact ballot language you'll see on November 2nd. I'd remind voters to make sure they turn the ballot over. This has been a good reminder for Dr. Clausen. I appreciate that. He's got this one stuck in my head now that you actually need to flip the ballot over to see the revenue purpose statement language, or the SAVE ballot language as we have it labeled here. The other informative work, I think, on the project is really, okay, well, how do the Pepple and Save relate to our FMP 2.0? Well, these are the two funding sources the district would use to construct that second facility master plan, or as we've started on that construction, these would be the two funding sources. We felt like this was a reasonable ask of the community at this time. The first facility master plan was a general obligation bond. The district's not asking for a bond this time. Again, no new money, no tax increase to the public in that way. It just allows us to count on those funds into the future, and would allow this second facility master plan to really happen. And so if you wonder what will happen with those funds and how the board and the community and the stakeholders have come together to try to make some of those decisions, this FMP 2.0 projects page would show the 3 different groups of projects. Completing the promise of FMP 1.0 is really the way we've phrased the first one here, and group some of these things. You see multiple pieces around classroom additions, new gymnasiums, fine arts and athletic upgrades that we know we need to continue to do. And I think really the idea there is we just weren't able to do everything that we identified through that first facility master plan. We had to commit to the projects as we stated as we would through the GO bond. We completed on time, actually under time and under budget from FMP 1.0, but as we complete that work, we always start to develop a list of, okay, what needs to come next? What needs to happen next? And so this is a pretty good list of those different things you would see there that we know are identified needs as we work through that first facility master plan. The second group is really life cycle projects. That's how a lot of our Pepple funds are expended, is through life cycles, because we never want to get into a situation as a large organization where we're trying to replace all of our technology, all of our vehicle fleet, or any of those components at the same time. We need to keep those on a recurring basis to make sure we stay in a healthy position that way. So there's other things that also go into that life cycle conversation. You see components around climate action, technology. We know has been a, even a very pressing need here for us as we've looked at the last 18 months through the pandemic. You see athletic components that are also needing to be figured into those different life cycle projects. And so group 2, it really represents those different components of what would be that second facility master plan. And then group 3 is maybe the most exciting part. Those are the long-term considerations, kind of the vision aspect of where we want to go as a district and where we know we need to continue to engage the community and have some further dialogue around grade reconfiguration, early childhood education, new elementary schools, not just additions. Or again, the climate action you see repeated here in this one. Career and technical programming, we know that's been a long-time goal of the board. So I think we have a lot of different aspects in that long-term considerations that should get us excited to be part of the school district and vision for the future about what we want our students to be able to do. And the culminating thing I would say about that second facility plan, the exciting opportunity for the district, is that it's really now able to look at how do we want the teach and learning conversations to drive our facility conversations, that it's no longer just let's get air conditioning, let's get HVAC up to speed, let's get the portables off campus, those types of things. What we're really talking about now is how do we design for learning? And I think those are what you see encapsulated here in that group 3 conversation. So I don't want to belabor the point this evening, but we did want to just make sure to highlight this as the vote is fast approaching on November 2nd, do a little explanation around what SAVE and PEPL are and how that funding, how those funding streams work, and then some of the projects really included in the second facility master plan that the district would be ready to move on at that point. I'd be happy if you guys, have any questions. We've talked about it a lot, right? So if there's any clarifiers you think I missed that would be important for the community here, I'd be happy to do those. I didn't spend a lot of time on the guiding principles document or the overview document, but this is really some of the theory, if you will, behind the work that we facilitated community engagement around Portrait of Graduate, those competencies. The board identified guiding principles to that work. And then finally, what were the stakeholder priorities through that process? So again, I would encourage people to look at that. Those are the informational parts that got us to the projects page I just went through. Anything I missed?
I'm a little leery to speak something into existence, but we talked in the past of what happens if, they don't pass, like that impact. One thing we never really talked about is sort of the share between the two pieces, because they are separate items on a ballot. So particularly if you have to turn the page over to see the second one, I don't know, maybe we have different outcomes for the two different pieces. Is there the money part, the dollars there, is it roughly 50-50 between those two? I'm just trying to get at, I know what happens if we don't pass both of them. I don't know, and I know what happens if we pass both of them. What happens if we pass one?
So I think before Les answers, just so I clarify it for me, you're basically asking, okay, what does that revenue share look like, right? What does that revenue come into the district? And if one passes, the other one doesn't, what kind of revenue would we potentially have?
That's the bottom line, right?
One
Like
of the
each one
sources?
is
Yep.
how we can use money or when we can use money. They are different, I guess. One is money and one's how you do it or when you can do it. But
Both funds are considered capital project funds by the state of Iowa, so the use of the funds is very similar or in a corollary manner. But the voted PEPL provides about $10 million of our total $12.5 million of PEPL revenue per year. The SAVE generates about $15 million for the district, but that's based upon a per pupil amount allocated by the state. So it takes the total pot of the state, divides it by the number of students, and then that times our district enrollment to determine our allocation of that. And that's, like I said, currently about $15 million.
so it's pretty close to split even. And one of them's, the money's there. It's just whether or not you can do something with it earlier based on the
Correct.
language and stuff like that. All right. That was really the only question I had, because we hadn't really talked about that a whole lot. Anything else, Director? Charlie?
Matt, under the Group 2 life cycle projects, one of my favorites is elementary buildings and playgrounds. You might perhaps add a little bit for the audience's interest about that part of the projects we'll be completing or engaged in with this plan.
Sure. So one of the more recent additions, similar to some of the climate action initiatives, would be our playgrounds to our life cycle costs. That's not been a long-term consideration of the district in the past, but that was something here over the last several years that the district's worked to incorporate into its life cycle budget to make sure that we're being able to fund those playgrounds from the district level rather than just relying on PTOs for that funding. And, you know, here recently we had Jeff and his team and Ben here and talk about some of that playground work. But that's a perfect example of one of those life cycle projects, like you said, Charlie, that goes into that conversation. And so I think that would be something that is important to highlight that we've taken on that, again, you can imagine we wouldn't want to be in a position about trying to replace all of the playgrounds, right, or trying to upgrade all the playgrounds. But that's somewhat of a position we were found in, right, is once we take that burden on, now we need to put them on a life cycle rotation so that we can start to address them systemically. We don't have enough cash to be able to do all of that at once, so they work into that. But yes, that's a definite part of the plan.
So thanks. And then under the long-term considerations, one of the areas we're really wanting to focus on is career and technical programming in classrooms and making sure that we can offer what students are asking for in that area.
Yeah, and I think that's an exciting one for us. You know, we've talked career and technical education a lot of different times, and I think a lot of people assume industrial tech right away when they think career and technical education, but we know it's much broader. Industrial tech's a definite important part of that. And I think that speaks to also some of the important conversation we'll need to have in that third bucket, right? Because we want to be able to outfit the facilities and provide a direction and a vision of where we'd like to take the programs. And then the difficult job for us will be, right, is aligning staffing, you know, to those components, right? Making sure that we're supporting staffing to make those programs work. But that's not what these dollars are used for, right? These dollars are the facility dollars. The link I would share with people, though, the risk for the district is we do have operational expenses. We can't get rid of operational expenses. And if we don't have these two funds extended, then some of those operational expenses start to compete with the funds that are spent on our human resources and to our people. We spend 83 cents of every dollar on a person in the district, and those come from the general fund. So if we don't have these operational revenue streams, then we start to have to pay for operations out of that general fund portion, and that starts to compete with how many people we're able to have in place to serve our kids. Kind of a bird walk there, Charlie, from CTE, but I thought it was important to reference.
No, those are very good points. Thanks very much.
And just to clarify that, if we take away from those human resources, that's classroom teachers.
That's, yeah, para educators, that's classroom
Paras.
teachers, larger class sizes, those
But one
different
could
components.
logically assume that would mean larger class sizes at some point, or we give up on some of, you know, we can't give up on all the operations, but we give up on some of this maintenance, and then I think we find ourselves in the same situation we were in 20 years down the road, asking for another gigantic bond to try to make up.
Right,
you know,
because we'll
for-
start delaying, you start to delay life cycles, you start to put off projects long-term. You know, you're gonna start robbing Peter to pay Paul in one way, shape, or form, right, from wherever you're taking from because you've just lost revenue, and so you do your best to make those different things match. So, yes, I think those are all reasonable things to think about that the district would have to consider, JP.
And I'd point out that we're all paying the sales tax anyway. Like, you know, that's gonna happen, so we might as well get that money back into our district, helping kids.
Anything else from directors? All right, shall we move on? Next up is our 21-22 school year update.
I'm going to sit down for this one, if that's okay. I just have a couple notes, and then I know Amy's going to share a little bit about Try-2 enrollment here with you this evening. But one thing is we went through the process of certified enrollment here on on October 1st. We don't have official numbers back from the state yet, but we will be reporting those back just as soon as we have those. Vaccine boosters is where I transition to next. When we look at that, we just communicated with staff yesterday that those individuals are all eligible to receive a vaccine booster, and so we put that information out to staff yesterday, and I know just from talking to folks, we've had people getting that right away yesterday or today. So that was encouraging news that came to us that we were able to turn around and communicate Again, you remember our strategy this time, because there's not the scarcity around the vaccine this go around, is to work with their healthcare providers or some of the pharmacies and providers in town. We're anxiously awaiting being able to try to disseminate some information for our 5 to 11-year-olds once the FDA officially approves that process. Behind the scenes, we've shared or been working on plans with the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics about some night clinics for their Iowa River Landing location, with things such as interpreters and transportation provided to those night clinics. But I think the most exciting piece we worked on this week was with the Visiting Nurses Association that works with our traditional flu clinics, is trying to arrange them to be able to come and do similar clinics for the COVID vaccine. And so they may not have enough staff to be able to do that at every location, so we may have to group schools. But between those two different offerings, we feel like our families should have some choice and some accessibility options increased once we are able to go ahead and go with those 5 to 11-year-old vaccines. So good news on that front, and I anticipate that quickly happening once we turn the month to November here pretty quick. Our COVID numbers overall, we shared last time, have been decreasing, went way down. I think we got as low as maybe 10 positive cases in the district. We're up a little bit here now, which I think followed probably trends that we had heard, would come through the community, where it would dip, and then we'd start to see a little bit of a increase in those. But I think overall good news on the front about decrease in quarantines overall. That was a big issue for us at the start of the school year, and we know that with students with the mask requirement in place, because of that K-12 exception, aren't needing to quarantine as frequently, and so that's been a positive thing. It's not that we're avoiding those in all circumstances, but more kids in school, more kids learning on a consistent basis, so that's been a good step for us on that front. So Amy, I'm going to ask you just to talk a little bit about Try-To enrollment and what we're seeing with that change.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Good evening, everyone. So if you remember, we had our enrollment window open between October 6th and 15th, and we saw a need from, or a desire from 86 of our families, or elementary school students, to make switches come November 18th. So 22 students wanting to go online at the elementary level, and 64 students wanting to go on-site. And at the secondary, we saw a little bit of the reverse happening. So we had 67 students wanting to make changes, with 43 of them wanting to go online and 24 on-site. So as we talked a couple board meetings ago about opening another enrollment period as soon as the vaccine was available to our elementary students, we are already prepping for what that needs to look like and what that timeline is going to look like. We are going to open that next enrollment period, thinking that we're going to sit students with their new teachers in their new settings on January 3rd, between November 4th and November 12th. So they're happening right on top of one another. We would like to communicate with families then that this would be the last opportunity to make changes this school year, and not offer another open enrollment period for third trimester, as we believe now that everybody is going to be vaccinated, that they should really truly know that what their choice would be for the remainder of the school year. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
When folks are applying, whether to go online or from in-person to online or the other way around, do they indicate a reason why, or just that they want to make the switch?
No, we don't ask them to do that, JP.
Okay.
Any other questions on that piece, anyway? All right. Thanks, Amy. Did you have more, Matt?
That was all I had for that item, President Eystone.
Okay, I'm looking right now at our dashboard, and I've been watching it the last few days and watching the number of positive cases, and quarantines are ticking up, slowly but surely going up. It's triple digits now on kids quarantining, so that's a little concerning to me. One thing that I've talked with Matt about, and I think it's time to at least mention it here as something we're going to bring back later, or at least I would ask that it gets brought back later, is we do need to determine metrics around the mask mandate, just like we had metrics around last year when we were changing through different learning models. And I think there's a lot of pieces to consider in that, right? I think a huge one is vaccine availability for the younger students, but I think we need to look at community numbers, but also, our own school numbers and put that all together. I think we need to have something, and there is the pending lawsuit that's out there that we have to still be mindful of, but I think we need to try and codify how that policy is going to, be kept in place or not, right? And so I think that's something we would certainly want to be visiting soon, right, and how we're going to put that together. And I know you were kind of looking at it sort of based on similar to how we did the metrics with the learning models, but, some sort of format and looking at other places, but I don't know if you want to comment on it now.
Yeah, I just think quick reaction to it, President Eystone and Board would be, we've designed our health and safety protocols this year around some of those transmission levels in the community. And so, we can start from that framework and try to put something together where we intersect that with the mask requirement in that way. I think it is a natural transition point to have that conversation, knowing that vaccinations are going to be increased to that next age group. Like you said, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that at different points, but we can't get to a landing spot with any of that if we don't start it. So we're happy to go back and work on that and start the conversation with you all.
Okay. I'd appreciate that. Any other comments or questions from directors on this item? All right, let's go ahead and move on to our equity update.
And Amy's going to go ahead and start this one off for us, and then I'll wrap it up with one piece.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to take a few topics, and then I'm going to ask Diane and Brady to share towards the very end here. So as far as PBIS and rethinking school discipline, last year we came back and talked to you about our work there. We continue that. We are going to expand upon 3 areas for all of you during that November 16th Board Education Committee meeting. And that night we plan to share data that we have so far this year in regards to office referral data, suspension data, and then really highlight 3 kind of key things that our team has been working on. Out of the Student Supports Department, we'll talk to you that evening more about our care assessment process that's up and going and underway. As far as Laura's team, Diversity and Cultural Responsiveness, she'll be talking to you about restorative justice work there. And then out of our Learning Supports Department, our focus, of course, on social emotional behavioral health. And like I shared, we'll be talking about the behavior data that evening. As far as professional development, last year, Laura did an equity series around culturally responsive teaching, cultural proficiency continuum, LGBTQ, and other related topics. This past month, Laura has provided information on her department's build-out. We've added some other central key people to her department. She shared that with the larger staff that day, and then really provided a nice overview on restorative practices to the larger district community. A new item for our team this year is to take a look at the TATE referral process. And over the last couple of years, there have been changes made to this process. As part of our ongoing work related to equity, we've committed to reviewing how this process is going and identify areas that may need improvement. And we recently held our first meeting around this topic and have our second one scheduled in November. I'll turn it over now to Diane for a quick social studies update in regards to elementary, and then Brady for secondary.
Sure. So as you know, we conducted the social studies review last year. Brady was the one who led us through that. And part of that review brought to light the need to purchase a new curriculum for our social studies program. So this year we were able to implement a new elementary curriculum, and then Brady is taking charge of looking at a new secondary curriculum. So the other thing we did this last spring is we separated the coordinator roles. So Brady is overseeing now just secondary social studies, and then we have Patrick Snyder, who's overseeing elementary. And that has provided us the opportunity at the elementary to do a little more professional development with our teachers. So Patrick led a group of teachers this summer to learn a little bit more about the curriculum we purchased, which was Inquire Ed. And the reason we went with Inquire Ed was a variety of reasons, but one of them was because at the heart of their program is culturally responsive instruction and inquiry-based learning. So we knew those were two things that we really wanted to focus on. So we piloted last spring, got a lot of great feedback. Patrick worked with teachers this summer. We identified one person at every building to be our social studies advocate or Inquire Ed advocate, that the program calls them. So we did some extra work with them this summer. We also revised our report cards to better align to our new curriculum. And we had a team of teachers working this summer to develop some additional resources for teachers to be able to use. So then the Inquire Ed advocates at each building have provided PD for our teachers in August before school started. They just did another one, I think, last week. And then we have 2 more planned throughout the year to continue to support the teachers. But Patrick is also out there working with teachers and implementing it. And I mean, we're getting really positive feedback from our teachers and from our students. Our kids are very much engaged. They're really interested in the compelling questions that are being asked. Kids are being given a voice in what they're learning. And then at the end of the units, they're asked to do a project that brings their learning outside of the classroom. So that could be a presentation, that could be a brochure, it could be a community project, something that helps them know that they make a difference in the community as well. So far, we're, always when you have a new curriculum, there's little bumps along the road, but we're getting great feedback on that so far. So I will pass it on to Brady, and he can tell you a little bit about the secondary process.
Yep, thanks, Diane, and directors, nice to see all of you. So secondary social studies teachers have been doing the revision and audit of the existing curricular units that we created, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So we're trying to build off of the work that we've done, but, apply a real critical lens to it. And we did an independent and anonymous audit of every curricular unit. We used the Understanding by Design curricular model when we created it. So it identifies what students should understand, know, and be able to do. So we took each of those items and put them into a Google form actually, and they were able to rate each of those items. So it gives us sort of a baseline data to work from in terms of how we revise those units and then make them obviously aligned with state standards, but also more units that promote culturally responsive teaching and learning. So that's the work that we're doing right now. Secondary is a little bit different in that there's not really a I love the Inquire Ed program for K-6. It's it's an awesome program. You get to 7-12, there really isn't a program. It's we have a real diverse course offering, which is I think a great thing about our district in all our curricular areas. So we're working across the curricular areas to revise the units, and then we'll use those as sort of a foundation point for the purchasing of new curricular materials. So that's where we're at.
Any questions for Diana, Brady, or Amy?
Sean, I just had one other item that we've worked on the equity update would be Janet, our ombuds, and I have been working through a charter that we'll eventually present to the board that will outline the scope and function of the office. And so we're working to have legal counsel also consult with us on that to make sure we get that structured right for the long term, and so that it doesn't become person dependent, that it really serves the form and function of what it was intended to do. And so at some point we'll be presenting that to you guys for consideration and approval. So I wanted to put that on your radar. That's been a big part of her work. She has met with a couple folks. We were really trying to wait to have the charter in place, but as the school year gets deeper, obviously some of those requests and those needs come forward. And so that would be, I think, the conclusion of our equity update there, unless you guys have questions.
Throw that out to directors. Any questions?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I will make a comment because, this was such an issue in 2017. And here's a good indicator of how long it takes to move the ship, that would now, and to do it well, and not just do it in a reactive way, in a way that just satisfies, but that we're getting our ombuds hired. Obviously, social studies curriculum, we kicked into high gear and then put a lot of extra effort behind that for good reasons. But it's just an example of how long things take, and especially to have sustainable change. So I'm really excited that, and especially the way Janet has come in and taking the time to really lay this foundation, make it not person dependent, so that this is a sustainable thing. But it's a good indicator of, things take time to do well, and I appreciate that we are taking the time to do it well, and that we are moving and getting it done.
Anyone else? All right, we can move on to our next item. We have our action item, to approve our 100 series as amended. Any further conversation on this from folks?
Sean, I wonder just briefly if you or the other policy and governance committee members might tell folks if we're making any significant change or substantial changes in the procedures so far in the 100 series anyway, and what those might be.
Not so much on the 100s. I think it truly is adding Janet in there as contact. I think there will probably be a bit more in some other ones as we move through time, but not so much in the 100s this time around.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And I shouldn't assume, but I am, that when you make those changes, that's the yellow highlighted piece.
Correct.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
I should have made that clear. Sorry.
I assume.
All right. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we pass the 100 series as presented.
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, Kim, ready to vote?
You have to do a verbal, because I cannot get either my cursor or my mouse to work. Williams.
Aye.
Godwin.
Aye.
Icestone.
Aye.
Malone.
Aye.
Clausen.
Aye.
Eastham.
Aye.
All votes are cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks, Kim. Last up, we have our agenda setting. We do have another ops committee scheduled on the 9th. I assume they will be celebrating after the vote on the 2nd and starting to plan in
And you are
earnest.
just trying to jinx us left and right during this meeting,
No,
Sean.
I'm speaking that one into existence. All right. We also have our regular board meeting on the 9th. We do have our usual suspects there. I was kind of excited to see the Grow Your Own on there at the beginning of the meeting. I'm very excited to hear that. We do have, it might be a little bit of time. Everybody's gonna groan a little bit. We do have quite a few presentations on there. So we do have our teaching and learning reports. So we're gonna have plenty of stuff to talk about there. We have our quarterly financial report and the car. We have a couple discussion things, so it should be a pretty lengthy thing. Another special action item, we do have to vote for the Grantwood AEA director. I just got the ballot in the mail. There's one person to choose from, so the vote should be easy. But it is pretty substantive there, so I don't know that there's room to add a whole lot else on there, but I listened to some folks. I'm told that maybe one of our directors, it might be their last meeting on the 9th, that we might have to have another celebration.
Yeah, no, it's Janet. She confirmed that in the ops meeting last month. So I just want to make sure that everyone's real clear about that. 'Cause she's going to try to sneak out of here.
You just said it's a very busy meeting, President Icestone. So I think everyone just
Always
may be
room
tired.
for a roast. I don't know, any things, Matt, that you needed to add on there or anything from other directors?
No, I was double checking. It looks like we have transfers on there, right? That's a follow-up conversation. Amy talked to you about Ed Committee tonight and the topic for that, so. Yeah, and you mentioned Grow Your Own, so.
Yeah, we may have
I'm aware of it. I think we
other,
got it.
we may have the 200s under the policy review, right, possibly on there as well. We talked about that tonight at P&G, so.
We may have that dress code back for you for a review at that meeting too, so we can make sure that the policy review gets cleaned up.
All right. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.